So, John, finally, we're going to talk about our topic today. And, we were talking with some of the guys, sort of, I call it the back office. And we wanted to talk about the toughest guys in wrestling, the toughest guys that you've been in the ring with, or the ones that maybe you haven't been in the ring with, but you've heard about. What would you like to start with today first, John? The guys you were in the ring with, or just the legendary tough guys that you've heard about through the years?
Let's go legendary.
Okay. Who's at the top of your list? Like if you were to list today, the number one badass in the history of professional wrestling, the real tough guy, who is it?
Karl Gotch.
Okay. Tell us why.
Karl Gotch. And I, not a doubt in my mind, but I'd say Karl Gotch. I've done a lot of history stuff, especially Mr. Briscoe on our podcast, Stories of Briscoe and Bradshaw. Not to give us just a free plug, but give us a free plug. But we've done so much history. So, and Karl Gotch, it's very interesting. So Billy Robinson was a badass. These guys come out of Wigan with Snake Pit over in England, and Billy Robinson was a badass. There's no doubt about that. But Karl Gotch, was there before him. A lot of people thought that Gotch was probably the best, but I've talked to Jody Malenko about it, who was one of Karl Gotch's students, who's, by the way, a very tough guy and a big-time shooter himself. He said he's been around him and that he saw that people deferred, even the tough guys like Robinson deferred to Gotch when he was around him. You could tell that there was just a little level of respect there about Gotch that was different. So I give it to Karl Gotch.
Of course, Karl Gotch represented the Belgian team in 1984 or 1948, rather, the Olympics there in both freestyle and Greco-Roman. He was going to master catch wrestling before turning pro, and all the others that were there, like Billy Robinson. Man, that's a bygone era. But is there somebody in a more modern era, do you think, or are you still going old school that you never met?
And also, by the way, I just looked it up. Billy Riley was the one of Wigan that trained Gotch. He was such a badass. But, Gotch was, and I'll get to what you're asked, but Gotch was also, Shamrock has told the story. He helped train Shamrock a bit too. Gotch was a badass, man. People, Gerald Briscoe used to tell stories about Gotch, at his house when he trained guys. It's just legendary. But Ken told the story with Gotch. Gotch is sitting there drinking one time for several hours, drunk, and decides to go out and run his class through a bunch of calisthenics. But he did them with them. By the end of the time everybody quits, it was down to just Shamrock and Gotch has been drunk for hours. I mean, Gotch was just a man, brother. It was unbelievable. Now, Billy Robinson was too. Billy Robinson and Jack Briscoe got into another name that should be on that all-time list. And Jack, I'd love to see Jack go at it with Karl Gotch, but he went at it with Billy Robinson, and nobody knows what happened. It was in a hotel room in Australia. Apparently there was a broken thumb and some other stuff, but neither one would tell the story. But I have a feeling I think Jack won it, but at worst it was a draw, I think. But they went at it pretty much all night. Both had been drinking, went up to the hotel and decided to go at it, and I think it sent the promoter into a tailspin because he might have lost his two big talents. He was kind of worried about it. But, man, there were some bad dudes that came through there. And, by the way, the guy who they called the policeman, he wasn't a policeman, was the guy who trained me, Brad Reingens. Brad has to go on that list, man. Brad was a 1980 Greco-Roman world champion, would have been gold medalist, USA's greatest Greco-Roman. Brad was a bad dude, man. There's been some tough guys in this business.
When you think about big-time badasses and tough guys, I don't think Brad is a name that immediately comes to mind. Would he just be able to tie you up in a pretzel, or what made him such a badass?
Yeah, Brad tied up Frank Anderson, a world champion, just in the gym. But Brad was just a bad dude. Didn't say anything. Brad was just a guy who just never talked much, but he was America's greatest Greco-Roman ever. And he was a guy that kind of took over for Billy, they say, as the policeman in Minnesota, which I don't know if all that's true or not. Brad doesn't seem like the policeman type to me. Brad was I shot with Brad for about 3 months because I had to do conditioning with him. And needless to say, I'm like the Harlem Globetrotters. I'm like the Worston Generals against the Globetrotters. He was the Globetrotters. I was the Ophir guy. Brad's a bad dude, man. And anybody who's ever worked with him in Japan, he's legendary. I mean, they treated Brad with freaking kid gloves. He was such a badass.
Who else would make your list on the cut of who were the toughest guys in wrestling?
Danny Hodge. Obviously, I mean, Danny Hodge, he was undefeated in wrestling, undefeated in boxing. Hodge was, man, that was a different level. He used to legendary. We go to, hardware stores and grab pliers, and he'd tell the guy, if I break them, can I have them? The guy go, yeah. He'd just sit there and break, for the heck of it, just break sets of pliers. He'd take a steel belted tire and he could squeeze it with his hands. Imagine that. I mean, that you can't do that with a machine in some places. Hodge was a bad dude. Maybe one of the greatest of all time as far as shooters. Leroy McGurk, the blind owner of the Oklahoma Territory, man, he was a bad dude. I mean, Leroy was he was something else, man. And of course, your old policeman, a guy named John Pesick, was one of the most famous policemen. I mean, he was just a double tough dude. And Farmer Burns, people talk about so much. Farmer Burns used to let himself be hung. He would actually drop with a noose around his neck, and as he'd be hanging, he'd act like he's struggling. He would sit there and whistle because his neck was so strong. I mean, those guys were just different levels. Londos was a different level. Strangler Lewis was a different level.
Wait. You just glossed over that. They're hanging the dude, and he's whistling.
Oh, yeah. Look it up, of course, on the internet. He's back in the 1910s or whatever else, teens or whatever it was. But, yeah, they would hang him. They would drop him, and his neck was so strong, he'd sit there and they'd hang a noose around him. And as he would sit there, he'd whistle, being hung. It was his gimmick. He loved doing that.
My God. My goodness.
Farmer Burns was the first great trainer. He's the one that, trained Gotch, talking about Frank Gotch. He's the one that trained a lot of these guys. Toots Mont, who worked with Vince McMahon Sr. Luthez would say there's never been a dollar that Toots Mont hadn't stolen part of it. But he was a bad dude. He was and I want to say bad, I mean tough, really, really tough guy. But those all guys came from Farmer Burns School.
I mean, Toots Mont really, I don't think people really understand his influence behind the scenes as a promoter, but I wouldn't have known that he was a badass.
Oh,
dropping that.
Toots was a tough dude. That's why nobody messed with him. I mean, nobody messed with him. He was a tough dude. Londos was a tough dude. He had to be.
When we think about of the more modern era, talking about the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s forward, does anybody come to mind? Who stands out to you as being the biggest bully of the woods, if you will?
Nearly everybody will say Jack Briscoe. I mean, anybody, even Harley would put over Jack Briscoe. But then you got a guy like Harley, and Harley was, man, that guy was a fighter. I mean, absolutely legendary stories. Flair, knows Harley very well and will say he's the greatest, and he may be as far as tough guys. But Harley was legendary, how tough he was. But you had a bunch of guys during that time that were really tough guys. Hanson was a super tough guy. Dick Murdoch. Murdoch was famous just for fighting everybody in Amarillo. I mean, that's why the Funks brought him into professional wrestling. He was legendary for going to bars and just fighting people. Murdoch loved to fight. I mean, loved to fight. I've been in brawls with Murdoch, and that guy knocks out whatever he hits. I mean, he's a heck. He looked like as Black Bart would say, a light bulb upside down. He was white and his big belly and his little big chest. But Brother Murdoch was tough.
A light bulb upside down is a tremendous reference. I'll use that for
SaveWithConrad.com.
My name's Rajiv. I'm in Sacramento, California. I came to Save with Conrad because I've heard Conrad talk about how he helps people all the time save money and the best route to go for getting some mortgages and finances done. And having heard so many different testimonials in the past, it made the most sense to go this route. We were in the market for a new house and we wanted to know what we could afford. So we spoke with Steve and then Diane to get through the pre-approval process to see what we could afford. And then once we were able to understand that aspect of it, that was when we were able to shop around for a house to get a mortgage through Save with Conrad. Everybody on the team was great. Everybody really explained everything fully to where it was more in like layman's terms to where I could understand it as someone not in the business or having shopped around for houses too many times. So being able to understand every step of the process and talking with everyone on the team about that was really, really helpful, and it made me feel really confident that I was going the right route. I would definitely recommend Save with Conrad to others. I know that sometimes people look at it and they go, oh, they're based in Alabama, what could they help me with? But I'm out here in California, and they were able to square everything away and get things done really quickly, as opposed to sometimes even people out here don't move as quickly as the Save with Conrad team. So everything was really well done, really efficient, and I would definitely recommend Save with Conrad to others. My name is Rajiv. I'm in Sacramento, California, and I was able to get into my dream home with SaveWithConrad.com.
Available, that's number 212, non-equal housing lender. SaveWithConrad.com.